Let's start with what's happening in the brain. When you're in a conversation with someone, a potential client, a business partner, a colleague, your brain is running constant, unconscious calculations about that person's intentions. This isn't metaphor. This is your mirror neuron system at work. Mirror neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. They're part of how we simulate other people's internal states. When someone is talking to you and they're genuinely interested in your problem, your mirror neuron system picks up on that congruence. Their words match their body language, which matches their emotional tone, which matches the structure of their questions. And when that congruence is present, something very specific happens. Your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, calms down. Cortisol drops. The prefrontal cortex, which handles complex reasoning and decision-making, gets more blood flow, more glucose, more oxygen. You literally become smarter and more open in the presence of someone who is genuinely trying to help you. Now flip that. When someone is performing helpfulness, but is actually calculating how to extract value from you, when they're using a closing technique they memorized, when they're mirroring your body language as a manipulation tactic rather than as a natural response, the congruence breaks. It might be subtle, you might not be able to articulate what feels off, but your amygdala notices. It sends a low-grade threat signal. Cortisol ticks up. The prefrontal cortex starts to disengage. And now you're in a defensive posture. You start looking for exits. You start finding objections. You become harder to reach, harder to persuade, harder to serve. And here's the thing the person doing the manipulating never understands. They think the resistance they're encountering is a problem with their technique. They think they need a better objection handler, a better close, a better hook. They never realize that they are the objection. Their orientation is the problem. The resistance is coming from inside the interaction. This is why I say the extraction model doesn't compound. Every interaction that triggers even mild defensiveness in the other person creates friction. And friction, over hundreds and thousands of interactions, is the difference between a career that builds momentum and a career that constantly resets to zero. Now let's go up a level. Naval talks about something he calls specific knowledge, the kind of knowledge that can't be trained for, that feels like play to you but looks like work to others, that comes from your unique combination of experiences and obsessions. And one of the things Naval emphasizes that most people skip over is this: specific knowledge is only valuable when it's deployed in service of others. You can have the most refined, unusual, powerful set of skills and insights in the world, but if you're hoarding them, if you're using them only to optimize your own position, they don't create leverage. They don't attract capital. They don't attract collaborators. They don't compound. Why? Because leverage, real leverage, comes from other people choosing to work with you, invest in you, refer you, return to you. And people only do that consistently when they've experienced you as someone who made their situation better. Not someone who talked about making their situation better. Someone who actually did it. This is what Naval means when he talks about accountability and credibility. You can't manufacture credibility with marketing. You build it by being the person who, when they show up, things get better for everyone in the room. Charlie Munger takes this even further with his concept of multidisciplinary thinking, and more importantly for our purposes, his relentless focus on avoiding stupidity. Munger's great insight isn't really about being smart. It's about not being foolish. And one of the most common forms of foolishness in business is what Munger would call an incentive-caused bias. You set up a system where your incentive is to sell as much as possible, regardless of whether it's good for the buyer, and then you're surprised when the long-term results are terrible. Munger would say, of course they're terrible. You built a system that rewards short-term extraction. What did you think was going to happen? The inverse, the Munger move, is to build a system where your incentive structure is aligned with the other person's outcome. When they win, you win. When they get a measurable return on working with you, they come back, they refer, they expand, they become a permanent part of your revenue base. This is not charity. This is intelligent design of your business model. And it's the only model that compounds, because it doesn't depend on constantly finding new people to convince. It depends on being so valuable that existing relationships naturally expand. Now, the Talmud has something to say about this that I think is underappreciated, especially in Western business culture. There's a principle in Talmudic commercial ethics that goes roughly like this. A transaction is only valid when both parties benefit, not both parties agreed to the terms. Both parties actually benefited from the exchange. This is a remarkably sophisticated idea. It means that a sale where you technically delivered what was promised, but the buyer didn't actually get value, that's not a complete transaction in the Talmudic framework. It's a broken contract, even if no clause was violated. Because the spirit of commerce in this tradition is mutual enrichment, and here's why that matters practically. When you operate from that framework, you start asking different questions before, during, and after every engagement. Before, is this person actually a good fit for what I offer? Will they genuinely benefit? Not, can I convince them to buy? During, am I delivering in a way that creates real, measurable improvement in their situation? Not, am I hitting my deliverables so they can't complain? After, did this actually work for them? Would they do it again? Would they refer someone? Not, did I get paid? Those are fundamentally different questions, and they lead to fundamentally different businesses. Let me connect this to how the brain handles value assessment, because there's a beautiful piece of neuroscience here that most people in business have never encountered. Your brain has a dopamine-driven prediction system. It's not a reward system, despite what pop psychology tells you. It's a prediction system. Dopamine fires not when you get a reward, but when you get a reward that's better than expected. And it drops when reality is worse than expected. This is called the reward prediction error, and it's one of the most important mechanisms in human decision-making. Here's why it matters for our topic. When someone interacts with you, a client, a partner, a prospect, their brain is constantly generating predictions about what's going to happen. If you're in a sales conversation and you're doing the standard thing, pitching features, handling objections, pushing for a close, their brain is predicting exactly that. There's no positive prediction error. There's no dopamine surge. There's no "this is different" signal. You're just noise. You're just another vendor. But if you do something unexpected, if you ask a question that shows you actually understand their problem at a level they haven't articulated yet, if you suggest a solution that genuinely surprises them with its precision, if you tell them honestly that your offering isn't the right fit and recommend someone who is, their dopamine system fires hard because reality just exceeded prediction. And that neurochemical event does something extraordinary. It encodes you in their memory as someone worth paying attention to, not because you pitched well, because you were genuinely, observably oriented toward their benefit, and their brain registered that as a significant positive deviation from expected behavior. This is the neuroscience of trust. Trust isn't built by reliability alone, although reliability matters. Trust is built by repeatedly exceeding the other person's prediction of how much you care about their outcome. And that can't be faked consistently, because the prediction error only fires on genuine surprises, and genuine surprises require genuine orientation, not technique. Now let me take this into the realm of what I call the creativity as system framework, because there's a connection here that most people miss entirely. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who defined the modern concept of flow, made an observation that's critical for understanding why creating prosperity for others is not just morally nice, but strategically superior. He said that creativity is not an individual trait. Creativity is a system product. It emerges from the interaction between an individual, a domain of knowledge, and a field of gatekeepers and peers who validate and distribute that knowledge. Think about what that means for sales and business. If creativity, meaning your ability to generate novel, valuable solutions, is a system product, then it depends on your relationship with other people. It depends on your access to problems worth solving. It depends on your ability to get feedback from the people you're serving. And all of that depends on one thing: whether other people experience you as someone who creates value for them. If they do, they give you access. They give you harder problems. They give you honest feedback. They give you referrals to other people with interesting challenges. And all of that feeds your creative system. You get better. Your solutions get more precise. Your understanding of the domain deepens. You enter a virtuous cycle where serving others well literally makes you more capable of serving others well. That's compounding. That's what Naval means by leverage that builds on itself. If they experience you as an extractor, the system collapses. You get less access, less feedback, less exposure to interesting problems. You stagnate, your skills flatten. And you find yourself working harder and harder for diminishing returns, wondering why your career feels like running on a treadmill. Let me give you a concrete scenario to make this real. Suppose you're a consultant, any kind of consultant, doesn't matter the field. You get hired by a mid-size company to solve a specific problem. The extraction-oriented consultant does exactly what was scoped. They deliver the report. They bill the hours. They maybe do a slightly better presentation than expected, so the client feels good about spending the money. And they move on to the next engagement. The prosperity-oriented consultant does something different. They spend extra time understanding the context of the problem, not because they're billing for it, but because they genuinely want to know, why does this problem exist? What upstream conditions created it? Who else in the organization is affected by it? They deliver the solution to the scoped problem, yes, but they also provide a brief, unprompted, not billed insight about a related issue they noticed. Maybe it's a process bottleneck that's costing the company money in a way nobody had measured. Maybe it's a team dynamic that's undermining execution. They mention it clearly, specifically, with enough detail that the client can act on it. What just happened? The client's brain registered a massive positive prediction error. They expected a deliverable. They got a deliverable plus an insight they didn't ask for. Dopamine fires. The consultant is now encoded as someone exceptional, not because of their technical skill, although that mattered, but because of their orientation. Their orientation was toward making the client's entire situation better, not just fulfilling a contract. And here's the compounding effect. That client calls back, not for the same kind of project, for a bigger one, a harder one that requires more trust, more access, more latitude. And they refer the consultant to their network, not with a generic, they do good work recommendation, but with a specific, this person sees things nobody else sees and actually cares about your outcome. That kind of referral is worth more than any marketing campaign you could ever run. It's worth more because it carries the credibility of someone who's actually experienced your value. And credibility, as Naval would say, cannot be bought. It can only be earned through accountability applied over time. Now, let me address something that I think holds a lot of smart people back from fully committing to this approach. There's a fear, and it's not irrational, that if you orient entirely toward the other person's benefit, you'll be taken advantage of. That people will exploit your generosity, that you'll end up giving away your best ideas and your time and your energy without being compensated fairly. And this fear is based on real experiences. Many of us have been burned. Many of us have given too much to the wrong people, but here's where the framework matters. When I say orient toward the other person's prosperity, I'm not saying be a doormat. I'm not saying work for free. I'm not saying let people exploit you. I'm saying something much more precise. Build your operation so that the way you make money is by making other people's situations measurably better. That's a business model, not a personality trait. It means you charge appropriately, because undercharging is actually a form of misalignment. It signals that you don't believe your value is real, and it attracts clients who don't value what you do. It means you qualify rigorously, because not every prospect is a good fit, and working with the wrong client doesn't create prosperity for either of you. And it means you walk away from engagements where you can't actually help, because pretending you can help when you can't is the fastest way to destroy credibility, and credibility is the only currency that compounds. This is what Munger would call staying within your circle of competence. You don't try to be everything to everyone. You get extremely clear about what you're great at, who you can genuinely help, and what the measurable outcome of your help looks like. And then you only operate in that zone, not because you're being exclusive for the sake of ego, because operating outside your competence means you can't deliver real prosperity to the other person, which means the model breaks. Let me layer in one more dimension here, because I think it's important and it's often overlooked. There's a principle from the science of deliberate practice, the work of Anders Ericsson, that most people know through the 10,000 hours oversimplification. Ericsson's actual finding was much more interesting than a number. He found that what distinguishes top performers from everyone else is not the quantity of practice, but the structure. Specifically, deliberate practice involves working at the edge of your current ability, with immediate feedback, with a clear mental representation of what good looks like, and with constant, precise correction of errors. Now apply that to sales and business development. If your orientation is extraction, just closing deals, your feedback loop is binary. Did they buy or didn't they? That's extremely low-resolution feedback. You can't improve from it because you don't know which specific element of your approach worked or didn't work. You just know the outcome. But if your orientation is prosperity creation, genuinely making the other person's situation better, your feedback loop becomes incredibly rich. Did they actually implement what I suggested? Did it work? How did it change their metrics? What was unexpected? What did I miss? What would I do differently? You're getting multidimensional, specific, actionable feedback on every engagement, which means you're improving faster, which means your ability to create prosperity for the next person is higher, which means your value increases, which means you can charge more, which means you attract better clients. This is the compounding engine that the extraction-oriented person never gets access to, because their low-resolution feedback loop doesn't support deliberate practice. Let me connect this to something from the world of learning science, because there's a mechanism here that operates below most people's awareness. When you're trying to learn something complex, a new skill, a new domain of knowledge, a new way of operating, your brain builds what neuroscientists call neural chunks. A chunk is a connected set of neurons that fire together because they've been co-activated repeatedly. When you first learn something, the individual pieces are separate, like individual letters before you can read words. Through practice, those pieces get chunked together into larger units. And the quality of your chunks, their richness, their interconnectedness, their flexibility, determines the quality of your performance. Here's the connection to our topic. When your orientation is toward genuinely understanding and solving other people's problems, you're forced to build richer, more interconnected chunks. You can't just know your own product. You have to understand the client's industry, their competitive landscape, their internal politics, their financial constraints, their personal fears and ambitions. All of that information gets chunked together with your technical knowledge. And the result is a kind of intelligence that can't be replicated by someone who's just memorizing scripts and techniques. You develop what experts call intuition, which isn't mystical. It's pattern recognition driven by deeply layered, richly interconnected neural chunks built through years of genuinely engaging with other people's problems. This is why the best B2B salespeople don't sound like salespeople. They sound like advisors. They sound like partners. They sound like people who understand your world at a level you didn't expect. And they sound that way not because they studied how to sound that way, but because they actually spent years oriented toward understanding and improving their clients' situations, and that orientation built neural structures that produce genuinely insightful responses in real time. Now let me bring in the concept of what I call the attention-opportunity link, which is the scientific translation of what many people loosely call the law of attraction. I'm not going to use any mystical framing here because I don't think it's necessary or accurate. What's actually happening is this: your reticular activating system, the RAS, is a network of neurons in your brainstem that acts as a filter for incoming information. You're bombarded by millions of bits of sensory data every second. The RAS determines which of those bits reach your conscious awareness. And the RAS is programmed by your goals, your beliefs, your emotional state, and critically, what you repeatedly focus on. When your orientation is toward creating prosperity for others, your RAS begins filtering for different information. You start noticing opportunities to help. You start seeing connections between people that could be mutually beneficial. You start recognizing problems in your clients' businesses that you're uniquely positioned to solve. These opportunities were always there. You just weren't seeing them because your attentional filter was set to "what can I extract?" instead of "where can I create value?" This is why people who operate with a prosperity creation orientation seem lucky. They seem to attract opportunities. They seem to be in the right place at the right time, but there's nothing mystical about it. Their attentional filter is set to a different frequency, not a cosmic frequency, an informational frequency. They're literally processing different data from the same environment because their RAS is calibrated to notice different things. And here's where it gets really interesting. Your emotional state affects the bandwidth of your RAS filter. When you're anxious, fearful, operating from scarcity, your RAS narrows. You see threats. You see competition. You see reasons to hoard. When you're calm, confident, operating from a sense of abundance, which again is not about pretending you have money you don't have, but about trusting your ability to create value, your RAS widens. You see more, you process more, you connect more dots. Your creativity goes up. Your problem-solving ability improves. Your ability to read social situations and respond with genuine insight increases. So the prosperity orientation doesn't just make you more ethical, it makes you more intelligent, not in the IQ sense, but in the functional, practical, problem-solving sense. It gives you access to more information, better pattern recognition, and more creative solutions. And all of that translates directly into better outcomes for your clients, which translates directly into more referrals, more trust, more revenue, and more compounding. I want to address one more misconception before I close, because it's one that catches a lot of thoughtful, well-intentioned people. The misconception is that this approach means you should never think about your own financial outcomes. That focusing on money is somehow dirty or contradictory to the prosperity principle. That's wrong, and it's dangerously wrong, because it leads to a pattern I've seen too many times. Brilliant people with real knowledge and real value who are broke because they convinced themselves that financial success would somehow contaminate their purity. Let me be direct about this. Wealth is a test of whether your knowledge is real knowledge. Not the only test, but a significant one, because knowledge that can't be translated into value that other people will pay for, is that really knowledge? Or is it just private entertainment? The Talmud is very clear on this. Knowledge must enter the marketplace. It must be exchanged. It must be tested against reality. And the marketplace is where you find out whether your understanding of other people's problems is accurate or delusional. So caring about money isn't selfish. Caring about money is caring about whether your service actually works. Revenue is feedback. Profit is proof that you created more value than you consumed. And pursuing profit through the prosperity model, through genuinely making other people's situations better, is not a contradiction. It's the purest form of self-interest, because it's self-interest that requires you to be genuinely useful, and being genuinely useful requires you to be genuinely skilled. And being genuinely skilled requires you to do the hard, unglamorous work of deliberate practice, honest self-assessment, and relentless improvement. Let me give you something concrete to do with all of this, because I don't believe in content that makes you feel inspired without giving you a mechanism for action. This week, I want you to take one relationship in your professional life, a client, a prospect, a colleague, a business partner, and do one thing that is specifically designed to make their situation better without any expectation of immediate return. But, and this is critical, it has to be something that requires your specific knowledge or skill, not a generic favor, not forwarding an article, something that demonstrates real understanding of their problem and real ability to help. Maybe it's a 5-minute analysis of something they mentioned in passing. Maybe it's an introduction to someone in your network who can solve a problem you can't. Maybe it's a concise, honest assessment of a risk they haven't considered. Do this once this week, then notice what happens, not in terms of whether they immediately pay you or refer you, that's thinking in extraction terms. Notice what happens to your understanding of their situation. Notice whether your brain starts generating ideas about how you could help further. Notice whether the conversation shifts. Notice whether the relationship deepens. Second, audit your last 5 professional interactions. For each one, ask yourself honestly, was I oriented toward understanding and improving their situation, or was I oriented toward getting what I wanted from the interaction? No judgment, just honest assessment. Because you can't change what you can't see, and most of us have blind spots about our own orientation that are invisible until we deliberately examine them. Third, identify one area where you're currently selling below your competence, where you're taking on clients or projects that you can't genuinely make prosperous. Maybe it's because you need the money. Maybe it's because you're afraid to say no. Maybe it's because you haven't clearly defined your circle of competence. Whatever the reason, recognize it. Because every hour you spend on a client you can't genuinely help is an hour you're not spending building the skills and relationships that would let you serve people you can genuinely make prosperous. And that's not just bad for your business. It's a violation of the prosperity principle in both directions. It doesn't help them and it doesn't help you. Fourth, write down in one sentence the specific way you make other people's situations better. Not a mission statement, not a tagline, a factual, testable claim. I help mid-size manufacturing companies reduce their operational costs by 15 to 20% through process optimization. I help B2B companies build sales systems that don't depend on individual heroics. I help professionals communicate complex ideas in ways that actually change minds. If you can't write that sentence clearly and specifically, that's your most important problem to solve. Because without it, you don't have a prosperity offering, you have a vague intention. Fifth, notice your emotional state when you're about to enter a professional interaction. Are you anxious? Are you thinking about what you need to get from this person? That's your signal that your orientation has drifted toward extraction. Before the interaction, take 30 seconds, literally 30 seconds, and mentally rehearse one specific way you could make this person's situation better. Not as a tactic, as a genuine reorientation. You're resetting your RAS filter from what can I get to what can I see that they need. And that small shift, practiced consistently, changes everything. It changes what you notice. It changes what you say. It changes what the other person's mirror neuron system picks up from you. and over time, it changes the entire trajectory of your career. Here's the thing nobody tells you about the prosperity orientation. It's not harder than the extraction orientation. It's easier, because when you're genuinely trying to help, you don't have to manage a complex web of manipulative techniques. You don't have to remember which close you're supposed to use. You don't have to perform confidence you don't feel. You just have to be curious, competent, and honest. And curiosity, competence, and honesty, unlike manipulation, get better with practice. They compound, they build on each other. And they attract the kind of people and opportunities that make both your business and your life richer in every meaningful sense of the word. Wealth is not something you take from the world. It's something you generate by making the world more capable than it was before you arrived. The people who understand that and structure their entire operation around it don't just make more money. They make a different kind of money. Money that comes with trust, with access, with repeat business, with referrals, with the kind of professional reputation that opens doors you didn't even know existed. That's not a philosophy. That's a business model, and it's the only one that lasts. If this resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it and leave a comment below. I read them all. Here's what I want you to answer in the comments. What's the most valuable thing you've ever done for a client or colleague where you expected nothing in return, and what happened afterward?